Hello everyone and welcome to another of Tetra's Fireside Chat. I am very excited this month because this is the very first time we have gone outside of our business to talk to somebody, give their perspectives on the property industry and various aspects of it. And we have an absolute zero focus on sustainability for this particular episode, which is something that's very important to myself personally, but very important to Tetra and the way that we do business. So I'm delighted to introduce Richard Hillyard from Langham Estate. He is the head of sustainability, who I'm going to pose some questions to, and he's going to share some insights from some real practical experience working with the business that he's in now, and no doubt from the past as well. And Richard is very much at the sharp end of an estate of properties and actually getting them to be as sustainable a business as they can be. So welcome. Good to talk to you. Good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Right. So first question. Could you briefly introduce yourself and give a glimpse into your life as head of sustainability at the Langham Estate?
I'll try. Richard Hillyard. I've been doing sustainability, energy management, environmental management probably for about circa 20 years now, which makes me feel really old. And I've worked in corporate sectors. I've worked in with finance clients, public sector, consultancy, in-house, and as well. So, very broad experience over the years of dealing with sustainability. It's many facets as you try and deliver it for companies at both operational and strategic level. But life at Langham is varied. It's complicated. We are going through a state of flux of change as a business right now to adapt and modernise, and sustainability and net zero I see and the board see as part of that solution. So we're currently navigating and understanding what our impacts are, what the severity is and the risk, and working out what sustainability and net zero means to us as an estate and where the action needs to focus. And that's, I've been in the role 2 years, and a lot of that work has been almost behind the scenes, pulling out information, pulling out data, working out just what is it we're going to do next. And that work is about to start. So it is very varied and involved. I've had to go at times beyond the typical boundaries of head of sustainability role due to the business needs at times and the advice needed to guide it. And it's been a really, really fascinating, rewarding challenge so far.
Great, thank you. I think I'll add in an extra couple of questions, which is, I think, just for definitions as much as anything else. What is sustainability and what is net zero? I mean, how long have we got? But yeah,
it is interesting how sustainability is such a broad field, such a broad focus. But ultimately, it's about managing today's resources, so that the future generation has resources. It's that resource management, and it crosses 3 key pillars. You've got economic, you've got environmental, and you've got social. And they all have to work in tandem to have that equilibrium point so that everything's working together. And each one of those that pulls a bit more from the other, you see issues such as climate change and ecological breakdown, and even impacts on society, well-being, and supply chains, and how people are living, as we are in a cost of living crisis right now. So sustainability is about bringing everything and making sure that we've got enough to suffice for now, but making sure that the future generation has it. And that's the crux of the issue, really. All the systemic problems of climate change and brings in that space. Net zero. I described this recently at an event. It's taking it as simply as I can. It's taking your carbon baseline as it is, say at your start point, let's say now, measuring that, and that goes, right, that's our 100% carbon baseline. We now need to reduce that in line with climate science and the Paris Agreement back in 2015, I think it was. And that means a 90% absolute carbon reduction from your baseline. And you have to physically reduce that carbon. You can't offset your way to net zero. You can offset in a way as additional. The Science Based Target Initiative calls that beyond value chain mitigation, and that's about investing in specific kinds of carbon capture and storage, that when we get to your long-term your long-term net zero target, be it 2035, 2040, 2050, that residual 10% is then neutralised in a very specific way to achieve net zero. And no one, it's still relatively new, even though net zero is a term that's been bandied around a good few years now, since just before COVID. It's still relatively new, and a lot of frameworks and a lot of standards are still in development. One that's come to the market in its beta version right now is the UK Net Zero Building Standard, which I personally believe and professionally believe could be a really, really significant tool in how we identify what is really a net zero carbon building and how we can deliver them. That's going through its testing phase right now. But ultimately, it is about reducing your carbon emissions by 90%, and then and that means delving in across scopes 1, 2, and 3. So your direct, your electricity, and your kind of value chain up and down it. And it gets quite complicated when you get into that. Prior to net zero, we talk about scope 3 emissions as a bit of waste, a bit of water, a bit of travel. Now you've got to look at your supply chain and the materials that you and the services that you're buying as a business to quantify it, and it's complicated.
Thank you. That was really, really clear. So you work for a London-based property company just up the road from us. At a broad level, what does it mean to be sustainable when it comes to managing property?
Managing lots of different complexible variables on a day-to-day basis, and dealing with lots of different agendas, priorities, needs, compliance issues. So, and then bringing everyone together so you can have a collective vision. One of the things is we are an active operational estate working on keeping a churn of tenants and space. We're a property company that isn't buying and developing new property. We've got a very much a static estate. It's the family owns its legacy, and it's keeping that active and keeping that revenue coming in, keeping our tenants happy, engaging with local community, which are starting to do and understand. Putting sustainability into the mix there, is to start thinking about the medium and long term, and that sort of changes some of the ways that the business has been running in the past, and bringing in new concepts and mindsets and looking at how we can innovate. And it's almost like a change of culture, a change management process that we have to go through, and navigating the way through that is pretty much the role at the moment, and sort of getting everyone to understand the terminology around sustainability and net zero, making it relevant to the business and how it can protect the future of the estate. And there's lots to talk about legacy and risk and future proofing, and that's kind of very relevant to how we want to look at this estate going forward.
So net zero for Langham Estates, what does that journey look like, and what are some of the big challenges that you're currently tackling?
Well, I've just in this week had the net zero transition plan and net zero strategy approved by the board, along with our Planet Mark net zero committed certification, the first Planet Mark member company to achieve that, which is fantastic. There's a lot of work has gone in to get us to that point, and you're talking. We've been working with Planet Mark for 18 months, and I've been with the business 2 years. So in that time, we've had to collect data to calculate our carbon baseline, understand what levers we need to pull and what the priority focus areas. And that's, it's a lot of behind the scenes work. We have identified 5 key areas, and that is, building utilities, procurement, refurbishment and projects, tenants and tenant energy use, and the people and the culture of the business. And that's been presented to the board. My next task is to take that to the senior leadership team and work out how we're going to deploy that. I have the governance structure ready. We have to navigate that and communicate that to the senior leadership team, and then out to the wider business and build the workflows and the programs that are going to line by line work through our action plan to deliver net zero. And we've got it's kind of into 4 phases. We've kind of got this initiating phase for the next couple of years. Then the phase after that, working towards our near-term targets, is around 2031 to 2033. Then going out longer, but it is breaking that down piece by piece, and then engaging and communicating it into the business. Because by empowering everyone and working everyone is the only way we're really going to do it. And that does bring a new level of accountability to the business and responsibility that we each as leaders have to own in the right way to make sure that we can communicate it and deliver it in the right way.
Thank you. It's worth touching on Planet Mark briefly, because it's through Planet Mark that we actually met each other, and we're committed to now starting work with them. So just a quick explainer on what Planet Mark is for people listening and watching.
Planet Mark has been around a long time. I'm trying to remember what Steve Malkin, who's the CEO, says it 12, 13 years probably, I think. But ultimately they are a certification body. They provide small and medium enterprises the ability to measure their carbon, communicate it, engage and report their progress. And they work with a plethora of different kind of companies, be it property companies, service companies, and across sector. And they've built up a really strong voice over the last few years, after more than a few years, within that sector about advocating the need to challenge and drive net zero and make the business case for it. And with all their membership, they have actually they do demonstrate how putting in strong sustainability policies and procedures and commitments can make a significant difference in the way you operate and make cost savings, but also drive and improve and diversify and expand and grow as a business. So they're really, really strong in doing that, and that's kind of one of the biggest appeals to give us. And the tangibility of having a certificate each year to measure that carbon is something I felt where we are as Langham Estate is what we need to give us the push and the annual check-in to make sure that we are actually going in the right direction.
So you're a London-based in terms of your property. We all know that London's got an aging property portfolio just in general, and that lots of the stock is older. It's and has the issues with that. And some of the stock is listed. To what extent, when you're managing and you have properties like that in your portfolio, can they be made sustainable?
It's an interesting and a very big question and a very big challenge, but simultaneously, it's because you've got an existing building stock that we currently have no intention to knock down, replace. We're going to be working very much within the existing envelope. Part of that being, okay, well, that limits the amount of upfront embodied carbon we're going to create. There will be, because as you retrofit and refurbish buildings, there's always going to be, but nothing on the scale of knocking a building down and putting brand new materials in. And again, when you're designing and building brand new buildings, that embodied carbon piece is very big. Where we won't have that. And you've also got buildings that have been around for such a long time that they've probably offset their embodied carbon from being built hundreds of years ago. So, but with that becomes, you've got older buildings that have got older systems and they might leak a bit more. And you have to take that case by case and look at it and go, well, what can we do? And when you look at the sort of net zero targets that are put around there around building energy use intensity that were set out by the UK Green Building Council, is you're talking office has got to achieve 55 kilowatt hours per metre square by 2050. And you go, well, that measurement takes into account both buildings that are new buildings that would absolutely smash that, and older buildings that are going to struggle to be there. And you go, okay, well, if that's a target and an area we've got to mind for, okay, well, how do we map that out? What does that trajectory look like, and where is it possible? And if it's not possible, what's the level of acceptance? And I've spent time working with the data that we do have for our property to try and go, okay, well, of our 76 buildings, what does the current energy and carbon profile look like? What are the opportunities that we could deploy across the estate? And again, the UK Green Building Council put out a very good guidance for retrofitting office space to net zero sort of beginning of 2024, which I took the 15 measures in there and went, this is pretty standard, let's deploy that. What does that do? And it got, when you model that, I'd say a good 90-95% of the estate in theory gets comfortably close. We make an 81% reduction in our built environment carbon emissions, which is 2/3 of our overall emissions. So it makes a significant dent. But you then go, okay, what's the practicality? What's the cost? And I suppose that starts to become the conversational piece. It's okay, well, to retrofit a number of properties is going to cost tens of millions of pounds, or even over hundreds of millions of pounds. And you've got to go, okay, what's that cost a year? Where are you going to find that money, and how do you prioritise it? And then it's a case of actually, well, by spending this money, you actually are going to be improving the quality of space, making it more attractive to tenants. Therefore, potentially, well, you are going to be protecting income and potentially driving additional and extra income through improved quality of space. So you then start talking about a cost outlay against a protection or revenue, which when you multiply annual income of a property company over 10, 15 years is pretty substantial. So it's making those sort of conversations and then working with realities of what is now and navigating that and having the right conversations with the right people in the business to map it out. And that's kind of the stage we're at. We've got a new head of property strategy who's going to play a significant role in how we bring those conversations forwards with our head of building surveying and refurbishments, our head of FM, our head of asset management, and myself. There's a lot of conversations in there to drive that, and it isn't going to be easy wins overnight. We've got to look at the next 2 or 3 years. of navigating a certain way with certain requirements that we have to deliver. But okay, once you get past that, what's next? And what's around your budget? What's realistic? What is the best way to deliver that decarbonisation on a old estate? And the other thing that comes with that is not just us, central London, there's electrical capacity issue. And everyone's competing for the same amount. We've got to look at, there's grid infrastructure problems. The grid at the moment isn't sufficient for what we need, and currently the plans for the future of the grid isn't sufficient. And part of the solution there is renewable energy generation. Does nuclear play a role in it? It's a big energy mix in that generation to decarbonise the grid. But then how do we reduce our demand, which helps with that energy security piece by reducing demand in the buildings, you're going to, as well as ensuring there's resiliency of supply, it's finding that balance. And obviously everyone talks about one of the key things for net zero is phasing out gas. We have to decarbonise, it has to go. What is its alternative? And everyone's pointing out heat pumps, which, okay, is a big part of the solution, but you're moving more and more to electricity. So therefore the grid capacity has to support that, the building infrastructure has to support that. And with our estate, we haven't got overly complicated buildings, but you still got to balance out. If I'm ripping out a gas boiler, then what is the electrical equivalent I need to think about there for space heating and hot water? You think about some of the bigger buildings that have got majorly complex system and major and high gas demand. You're talking some significant internal infrastructure changes on some of the larger buildings in bigger cities and in the UK about how we navigate that change. So it isn't easy, and there's lots of innovation and changes that have got to come as part of that.
I mean, you're touching there on technology, and I mean, how do you see technologies and particularly emerging technologies shaping the future of sustainability in property?
It's going to play a very major critical role. There's lots of emerging technology out there. I'm not going to talk about anything specific here, but there's technologies that are around now that are going to be here for the long haul. There's probably going to be some sort of stepping stone transitional technologies as we go along the way, as well as materials, because what we can do now to decarbonise may not be a total solution with certain materials and certain technologies, but it may pave the way the next 5, 10 years, because no one really knows what the market's going to be like in 10, 15 years, which is why we talk about net zero. It's important to have near-term and long-term targets. So you've got to break it down and look at how the best way you can deploy the here and now with that slight foresight for the future. Solar PV will play a role, but you look at it's going to work in certain locations as opposed to others. And then there's planning requirements. It's great, but the planning councils of local planning have got to support it to make it work. And it's also about how you think about approaching projects and approaching refurbishments, because you can't just go and dump in the best tech and hope it's going to work. You've got to almost take a soft landings approach about taking the lessons learned of your current use, putting that into your informed design intent, whether you're building new or refurbing, and taking that through the design stages to make sure that you're designing a fit-for-purpose building that delivers what you want it to do, but also bringing in sustainability and net zero considerations, so that when you have your KPIs from the building performance, you're factoring that in as well through the whole design and manufacturing and delivery process, so that when it goes into operation, you can then have that nice soft landings monitoring that transition to make sure things are going to work. Now, I've seen a number of buildings over the years that have had the renewable bling put on that don't work. And those give those technologies a bad name, and no one wants it. And you went through a phase where people putting biomass boilers in just to get through planning. They put them in, they ran them for a month, and then turned them off. That's fundamentally flawed. So you've got to make sure you bring in the right balance of the right technologies to suit the need of the building to get it to run the way you want it to. And then also, people have got to use the space. You've got to make sure people know how to use it and are using it, and you've got the right temperature controls, the right timings, the right lighting, etc., and building that culture of informed change in the work environment, so people can use the space that you've designed.
I think there's a tendency for people to see climate tech as a sort of magic bullet to solve all these problems.
Yeah, I mean, like there isn't currently a silver bullet. I like to think that nuclear fusion would be a fantastic way to go, but we're decades away from it. If we ever get to that is silver bullet tech. But I'm not anyway that kind of level of scientist to be able to talk about that. But I do see that. But we're decades away. It's like previous government administrations talk about hydrogen. Now, majority of current hydrogen is dirty. It's incredibly carbon intensive. It's got to be, they talk about blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Well, blue hydrogen is a carbon capture storage technology facility bolted onto onto a hydrogen plant. That's not a solution. You've got to make it green, and that's again decades away from reality there. So we've got to work with. But I'm not saying, not disregarding everything completely, but maybe we need to move more money into those areas, taking those vast billions of pounds of profit from the energy sector. My personal view is that no fossil fuel company should be making profits anymore. All that money should be taken into how we solve climate change and putting it into innovation, finding solutions that can decarbonise the grid, live as more energy efficient buildings, and it is marginal gains as well. You look at it's heat pumps, but you've got to have your building fabric at the same time. It's looking at your lighting controls, building units. There's so many layers that can impact it. And it's about bringing that into unison so we can all work collaboratively.
Thank you. So you talked about the social aspect of sustainability a minute or two ago, because sustainability isn't just about the fabric of the building or emissions or net zero, and I'm really interested in as a business your engagement with the local communities and the neighbourhoods in which your sites are located, and how that sits within your overall strategy and actions when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, the social sustainability piece, we are currently in the process of finalising our social sustainability strategy. We work with Planet Mark to do that, because we've been going through, again, part of our approach to overall sustainability is to understand what's important to us, what are our values, how can we work with the local community, tenants, and also, very, very importantly, our staff, our people. That's an incredibly important element to all elements of social, and that is going to be our starting point. We know that we need to implement changes. We need to do certain things to work on our internal structures to provide more support for our staff, and then also look at how we can engage with our tenants, and again look at how we can engage with the wider community, because there are far-reaching benefits. The Langham Estate has the potential to be a shining light in Fitzrovia by working, by supporting our staff, working with tenants, and engaging with local community. Because if we get the balance right there, you can bring an incredibly diverse and changing demographic into the estate, and that in itself not only supports those groups, it also provides opportunities to create space and build that and sustain that legacy for the estate. But we are at the beginning of that journey, but there are some things happening. We do work with and donate money to schools. We're launching 3 initiatives at the moment where we're going out looking for running a competition for a local artist. We've got a big blank space of wall on the estate, which actually we're going to turn it into a mural, where we want to support local artists to do that, to create a nice visual focal point in the community. So again, that's something really, really positive. We're about to run a wellness week during May with a number of our tenants to promote well-being in the community. And we're also again going to be looking to do something with local artists and using recycled materials to promote circular economy, to actually sponsor a bench to also promote the need for communal space and communal seating. Right. So certain things are starting to happen, and we're looking at all, but we're also in our service office, Gilmore House, we're working and supporting with a tenant who are doing a charitable clothes collection at the moment. So there are things happening. We're working hard now to bring it together so that we can work out what is our long-term future and strategy for social peace. Because you have to get the people bit right as well as going after the environment, because you've got to bring it all together, because it all works in tandem.
Great, thank you. So getting the people bit right, there's a question now about getting wider company buy-in. It's something we were talking about earlier. It's just getting the whole organisation to understand the importance of sustainability, but also understand what their role could be as well. I'm really interested in the kind of the teams that you're working with. You mentioned the SLT, but you mentioned other people as well. Just kind of give us some colour to how you're getting buy-in within the organisation and what that's like.
Slowly but surely. The last couple of years has been that journey, and there's got to be a better term. But one of the things that we've realised was, Langham Estate's gone, it almost went overnight from not talking about sustainability and net zero to actually bringing these topics into everyday conversations. And one of the things that I we need to upskill and capacity build the staff, so everyone at least gets exposure and the opportunity to learn about what these are. So one of the first things we did was we put every single member of staff through carbon literacy training, which was led by a consultancy, Green Gauge Environmental. That was broke down three very much about the policy, about what it is for the built environment, and about action. And that worked really, really well. It's never about getting everyone to pass it. It's about putting everyone into a room to hear the terminologies being described and how it's relevant to a property company. That work actually got nominated for an award with Property Week. Didn't win it, but it was nice to get nominated. So that was a key piece in starting to get that communication piece. And again, through working with Planet Mark and using my own technology and work also Green Gauge and various people, it's getting in the room and talking to people. I know full well that from the CEO, he's told me himself that he has definitely learned a lot more about sustainability in the last couple of years. And you can sort of see the conversations changing across the board members, across the senior leaders in business, how they're engaging it and trying to and understanding it in their own way and getting to grips with the various terms of what's needed. The compliance piece is key there because we have to report to the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting legislation, SECR. There's a need for that, so you've got to understand that. But that conversation is starting to drive change in how we're starting to have conversations in the teams. The next stage, now we have our net zero strategy, is to communicate that and build collaborative work and engage with everyone in the business in a new way to get people to work towards it, because that's the only way we're going to get to net zero. And you need the technical specialists to advise and guide, but you've got to put sustainability into this is just how we do things into everyday life. And that's not achieved overnight. So we've got to now look at how do we go about doing that. And that's the narrative that I'll be working closely on as we launch our approach net zero. But it's the ongoing conversation and talking to people and communicating and exposing people to training, webinars, any opportunity to get the conversation going. And you start to see little things. You start to see people who may be a bit, put their hands up, oh, I don't like that. A few weeks later, they actually come back with, because I've looked into this, and they start to motivate themselves, or someone's looking to procure something for the business, and they go, oh, hang on here, I haven't thought about sustainability, and they come and have a conversation. One of those was very recently about printing, and so okay, as small as that is in some cases, we're talking about some of the bigger projects, but the conversation is starting. We've implemented a sustainable design brief for our refurbishments. That starts a conversation because that's about putting certain requirements to our design teams and the contractors to think about things about how they're going to meet that requirement. And our head of building surveying is rolling that out. We are about, again, with Planet Mark, part of the work for Net Zero is we're going to be running a supplier summit, sustainability summit later this year, so we can start talking about our supply chain. So it's about conversations, and that's how change starts. It starts with a conversation, and it can be about the smallest thing, and that has a ripple effect. And that's kind of what we're going to start doing more of, and what I'm going to start doing more of in the role as we embed sustainability and net zero into the business.
Great, thank you. One of the other things that you've talked about is the importance of data. And so how are you using data to kind of overcome challenges, basically within your business? I mean, what role has it got? Yeah,
data is king, as the phrase goes, and you need it. It's you can obsess over quality and what you've got and visibility, but you've got to put a starter in the sand. And data is something that you can improve over time. That's something certainly we're doing with Langham, is we're working with what we got to get our baseline, and we're already working to how we can improve. And doing what I've been doing for 20 years, I mean, energy data has always been there and thereabout because of the way it's been captured, but still conversations about water data quality, which I've been really having the same conversation about water quality, but water data quality. And same with waste data. But those conversations keep moving forward, and you start looking at how you can do it. And we've got some interesting partners. We're using First Mile for our operational waste, and that's improved data on our operational waste significantly. We've brought in any junk from an ad hoc perspective, and that's starting to improve visibility there. And it's about looking at as data partners as well as what you're controlling internally. And it's about finding a starting point, capture what you can capture, and then take the next level. And then it's important to catch it because you can measure your success, but it is easy to go down a rabbit hole very quickly. But it's about taking that step and going, what do we need here? at each point to be able to measure and capture. And quite a lot of times as a sustainability professional, you can be in a chasing data and reporting mode, which can be, I'll be taught to be a strap, it is incredibly not mind-numbing. And sometimes you are thinking, why am I doing this? Because you are literally putting numbers into a spreadsheet, but you need to do that to understand where the impacts are.
Yeah.
I mean, like one of the significant things that's come out of baselining is we know that our 2/3 of our carbon emissions is through energy use, be it from our tenant energy use, but for our own gas, electricity use in the buildings. We then know that our next area, probably about 20%, is refurbishments, and then after that it's procurement. And there's a bit of element about data quality. I think waste data emissions is higher than what we've calculated, but we're now working to improve it. But you start to have those conversations. And what's going to be quite interesting, anyone embarking this journey is, everyone's going, what if I start capturing data and I start seeing that I'm getting more emissions than what I initially had? Okay, well, don't worry about it. Yes, it's a concern because you found out you're using more, but actually what that's showing you is you're getting better data, which means you're understanding your impacts more. And anyone going through this, so you create your baseline. The first 3 or 4 years, you're going to see major shifts in data in where the emissions are. But that's a good thing because you can drill into the data, you can understand it, you can work out to understand where should we prioritise our resources to decarbonise. And that's the kind of how you have to use it.
Thank you. So last question really before we close, for people who are on their own sustainability journey, wherever I know you said journey, as it were, it's one of those terrible words, but it is what it is. So, people listening and watching to this will be at different stages. I mean, Tetra's kind of in many senses the very beginning of our journey. You're obviously a lot more advanced. So, whether as individuals, but also as businesses and perhaps as both, what are the top priorities in your view, and what should people focus on perhaps individually and perhaps as businesses, and kind of what's the mindset that you recommend that kind of would drive progress?
I think the first I'll say is don't be scared. And the sustainability net zero it can be a complex, daunting landscape because it's terminology and it's a very involved process. And we see a lot of targets that have been set. Everyone's going, oh yeah, we're making a net zero commitment, and then they start unpicking what they got to do, and you see quite a few companies have reined it in, which is scary. But don't be scared to get into it because you've got to understand the starting point, and it is going to bring out uncomfortable conversations and things you might not want to talk about as a business. But if you get into that space, you can start to unpick that and work out bit by bit how you can change it. Positive mindset, something I continuously battle with internally because I can get quite caught up with the geopolitical nature of the world right now. And, as a sufferer of climate anxiety, you have to manage that. But it is important to be positive, celebrate the successes. And that's something that I keep telling myself and my colleagues keep telling myself. Because if you start looking at breaking down what you are doing well, it outweighs the negative and it builds momentum to drive forwards. Find the people in the business that are passionate about it, who want to do it. They will be your champions, your tigers, so to speak, jumping around, making noise, because that's also how you drive change and create that culture of this is how we do things. And it can be the smallest thing. It can be a decision to purchase a different kind of product that's more sustainable, that triggers a whole raft of change. Or you've actually found out a statistic about disposable cups. I mean, that was a trigger in a company that I worked before. When you calculated that amount of disposable cups you're going through a year was equivalent to 187 shards stacked high at a cost of £20,000 a month. That changes conversations over something quite small, but then that actually had a shockwave through a whole department where it opened a door for more conversations in different parts of the business that I didn't think we were going to have that. And I think it's looking for those opportunities and championing success. There's always going to be barriers and resistances, but those mindsets will change. The more you encourage it, the more you create positivity and you take people on that journey with you. That's kind of where I'd focus on, but as a way to drive change in the business and to focus on, it's positive attitude, don't be scared, knowledge. Share knowledge, talk to people, explain the acronyms, explain why you're doing it. That's a very key thing that's come out of a lot of sort of events that I've been into talking and sharing knowledge so that it doesn't become, that's the sustainability person's specialty. Have the sustainability specialist be the internal external, share the knowledge internally so that people understand the relative to their work, their life. And people will probably go home and think about it as well. So I hope that's answered that.
That did, and I think I'd also add on, as Anita Roddick, who started the Body Shop back in the day, once said, I think it's something along the lines of, if anyone thinks individual actions doesn't make a difference, they haven't slept in a room with a mosquito.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's kind of like, that individual actions matter. And I think one of the wonderful things that you also said earlier is about conversation. And, for us, this has been a hugely useful and practical conversation. I hope those who are watching and listening have found this inspiring, but also found that, there is a path to do something. And as you say, it starts with having conversations with people. It starts with finding your tribe within your organization. You can, as an individual, make a difference. And that, in essence, is why we put out the content that we do. Our guiding principle for what we do at Tetra is to be useful with these things. And I can certainly say that this is the first thing that we've done in this space of sustainability. We will be doing more, and this is a call for anyone who is in the property industry who's interested in having a conversation with myself and with Richard and with others about that. We would be very keen to do that. Just get in touch and we'll carry that conversation on. But Richard, thank you very much. You've been really inspiring and illuminating and enlightening, and I feel I can go off and do things practically as a consequence of this conversation, and that's no bad thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Just anecdotally, I thought it was very interesting that you mentioned Anita Roddick at the end, because that was one of she put together a book called Take It Personally, which I read at university, which was one of the first books that sent me on my course. So that was kind of nice.
Likewise. There you go. Good. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Good.
Thank you.